We have one other person who's going to join our panel. Let's have all the panelists join up here, and Sandra be right next to me. We've talked about, you saw the Venn diagram. So we had someone talk about the OT side and someone talk about the IT side. Sandra's here representing the land of confusion. Okay, because that's where she lives in the Arkema organization, is in the land of confusion. And her background, prior to, I think it was 2008, if I'm not mistaken, one of the divestitures that Adam mentioned from the Dow Chemical Company was the styrenics business. And Sandra was a member of that particular business, so the assets, including the human assets, migrated with the business and were acquired by Arkema. And so for the last roughly 8 years, she has provided services as part of the corporate manufacturing organization supporting this interface issues between IT and OT. She has a lot of experience in both process automation, running plants, as well as in the MES layer. And so I'm going to give the microphone to her. Why don't you take that one? And fundamentally, we don't have slides for her, but each one of the gentlemen presented said, here's our situation, and this is the change, the degree of magnitude of change that took place. So Sandra, the question to you is, as a member of Arkema now, what scale or type of change have you experienced relative to this IT-OT investment challenge?
Yeah, so Arkema is a relatively young company. They were formed around 2006. The acquisition that I was a part of was the second one in their history. Since 2010 is the actual date of the acquisition when I moved over. But since 2010, there have been another 12 acquisitions that they've done just in the last 8 years. Anywhere from a business of tens of millions versus one of the more recent large ones was over $1 billion of sales and 5,000 employees on a global scale. So the company is not quite doubled, but somewhere between 50 and 100% doubled in the last 10 years as far as their sales goes and the number of employees. So when I came in, I was the automation leader for the group that came in. So I was part of that transition. So I give Arkema credit there. I was on a transition team with Arkema IT, went through those steps of identifying all the systems. How do you cut over? I was 2 laptops for a while. So you get your Arkema laptop. I still had the Dow laptop until we completely get off all the Dow systems. But since then, I think they've done it enough times. I think they've lined out, and particularly the IT side of it. Arkema has a formal IT group with all the business processes and standards. They do not have corporate OT organization, as I would call it. I'm informally in that. I'm a contact for the plants. But I wouldn't say there's a lot of structure around the OT departments. A lot of the plants manage their own stuff, and we're trying to. The cybersecurity effort is the first thing that's really pushing some consistency across the OT space.
Let me ask you a question. What we saw a number of individual challenges. Can you identify one particular project or challenge that has been most difficult for you to tackle? An example.
Well, the one-offs come in there a little bit. Certainly what the people at the plant floor are used to using those tools and switching them off. We had to go backwards in our operating system from the laptop, went from Outlook to Lotus Notes. Again, those are a little bit more on the inconvenience. One of the asset utilization tool that we were using within Dow, they let us keep part of it, the database piece and the data acquisition, because that was all coming, but the web interface was considered Dow proprietary, so we had our data but no interface to it. So then we had to quickly go out and contract a custom application to build a new web interface so that they could still maintain that functionality. But it was, it's devil's in the detail, getting all those little applications listed to make sure you don't miss anything so that you don't disrupt the plant and lose production in that interim.
So let me just for clarification, ask the fundamental question. You had how many acquisitions in the last 10 years?
12, roughly. Yeah.
Every year, something has changed, dramatically
Right.
changed.
I will say, you talk about putting out the very first acquisition Arkema had, it was a totally self-contained company with their own SAP system in that. And I don't know if it was because it was the first one, but they did not force them to go on to the Arkema SAP. Now, we were divesting from Dow, we didn't have our own SAP, so we were moved in. But they ended up leaving that one on their own system, and I think they go back and forth. They haven't, where it didn't make sense, they didn't force them on to the new system unless it had to be for financial or governance. But there was one relatively large acquisition. Arkema was coming out with a new SAP maintenance, getting everybody's got to go on this new maintenance system. And this one particular company had their own maintenance system. And it was like, well, this one didn't have some key functionality that they wanted on the old one. So they've been in the company about 4 years and they still haven't transitioned. And they're waiting for this other one to, hey, we need this additional functionality with mobile interface or something like that that they really wanted. So they did let them keep their other maintenance systems. So, a little bit of give and take there on how much you want to force somebody to go on that corporate system, maybe when it doesn't make quite sense at that point. So a little give and take and letting you keep some custom stuff or a little bit different until you come up with a good standard.
Let's turn over to the audience. Is there any questions out there? Use cases? Oh, there's a bunch. Okay. Let's start over on this side over here. Right. Back, right side. Okay.
Great. Great presentations, a lot of great insights. I'm Linus Hakimatter, and my question is about master data. So how did you handle master data? Did you, especially asset master data, did you migrate it as is? Did you do any cleanse? Specifically, I'm thinking about functional location, material masses, etc. And what do you consider best practice in acquisitions and mergers?
So we have a team that has become quite skilled at doing the cleansing and the transformation of that master data into our systems. And so we kind of, I think, honed the skills of that team on our own ERP migration, because we migrated from R2 to ECC back around 2010 timeframe. And since then, with each acquisition, we have that team pretty much full-time busy doing this type of work. And so we actually do have a process and a set of tools that automates as much as possible the cleansing and migration of that data. And that's true for all of the master data in SAP.
Gary, did you have similar experiences?
I would say that we didn't have quite the exact same experience, because for all the acquisitions that we did after the Hercules acquisition, they were coming on to one ERP system. It was our system we were bringing them into. But when Ashland bought Hercules, we were both on 2 different instances of SAP and 2 different versions in addition to 2 different instances. And I think because at the time Ashland's systems were more vast, they actually took us back a version in SAP to integrate.
There we go. Adam took them back.
Yeah, we did that to Union Carbide as well. We took them back into R2.
Yes.
But took them back to R2 to go to ECC. I mean, it didn't skip
eventually.
Yes, eventually, 10 years later.
But there was certainly pain, I could attest to that. Question?
So with the advent of, or the convergence of all the technology, you see it all around the show today, yesterday. Could you maybe comment on how that impact of these merging of technologies is going to impact the complexity of combining these functions as you're doing mergers and acquisitions, but then also the complexity of your organizational clarity. I think something you talked about at the end of your presentation.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, and the complexity, I think, is just going to continue to increase. I mean, you see in every presentation we're talking about adding more automation, more integration, and more use of data. And so I think it's going to be really important for us, in the industry to think about your strategy in terms of how you build that integration and how you build that complexity. Think about, how am I going to deal with mergers? How am I going to deal with divestitures as you design the system so that it's thought about up front, rather than trying to figure out how to do it, when you're after you've signed the deal, essentially. I don't know that there's a magic bullet necessarily. If I did, I probably couldn't tell you. But I think that's part of the challenge that we're going to have as well, is figuring out how do we design these systems in such a way that we can facilitate, because I see the M&A activity continuing to accelerate, and all of this digital transformation is increasing the complexity, and we need to figure out how to add that complexity in a way that facilitates the M&A work.
And I guess the one thing I would add is actually something that's sort of positive, and as much as the complexity is for sure getting worse, the attention to cybersecurity has forced companies to actually pay attention to everything that they have and all those touch points and document it and make sure that they're following policies and procedures a lot better than maybe they had in the past. And I think that actually helps the issue that you're talking about. And it certainly doesn't solve all the problems, but if you start out understanding and having a good picture of what's there and how it talks and how it's secured and communicated, that's a good first step in that direction.
So I didn't speak to the change management or the side of this, but actually we did discover that with the increased integration with the shop floor systems, you have a lot more IT work to do around the integration or the interfaces, but the change management actually can be simplified, because you can potentially allow the users to use the same tools and the same interfaces, and you make the change transparent on the back end. And so there can be advantages, and if thoughtfully designed, I think we can actually facilitate this.
Was there another question there? Okay, yeah.
I'm Dale Maloney with Honda. I earned the title within Honda of Shadow IT and Rogue. I built isolated machine controls networks and brought in a SCADA system, adding to the application portfolio, which IT wanted to limit. So how do you enable innovation while limiting your app portfolio? And then as for the networking side, if you're encountering DMZ isolation from the business network of your machines, have you found that lowers the risk in the acquisition, because those machines wouldn't necessarily need to be re-IP'd and broken?
Gary, you want to start that one?
Okay. Well, so I guess first of all, I'd say that when it comes to the applications that you have out there, you're always going to have some level of plants having an independent system to do this, that, or the other thing. But if you can try and get them talking and share tools, often you'll find that there's some commonality and that they can settle on a very few number of tools that accomplish the goals that they ultimately have. And that standardization and developing expertise across the organization really helps to solidify the benefits and the sustainability, because when you have one-offs like you're describing, that one person leaves or changes jobs or whatever, and the likelihood is that that tool then dies and doesn't maintain. Okay. Okay. And so in that case, whether you did it from the bottom up or from the top down, as long as it becomes more global, that, is something that can be sustained. The real question then becomes, okay, when it has to, how does it communicate, how is it supported, and how does that tie in with all the other IT platforms to sustain it?
Yeah, that's a problem that is all too recent for me. We actually did have a shadow IT organization kind of grow up in Dow recently, partly because we were in the middle of the big ERP migration, plus a number of significant M&A projects, and our IT department was so overwhelmed they didn't have any time to really provide some of the solutions that our manufacturing, particularly our maintenance organization, was looking for. And so they took it upon themselves to go do this work on their own. And so we figured out this isn't sustainable. We have to change the organization, and we have to change our priorities so that we're meeting the business needs and keeping our plants running. And,
Thank you for admitting that.
yeah, I mean, the reason that shadow IT grew up was because IT was not delivering what the businesses needed. And we acknowledge that and have started creating innovation centers where we dedicate resources that can, especially with all this emerging technology and the digital transformation effort, we've been able to garner support to dedicate some individuals to looking at new technologies and working in an agile fashion to deliver small solutions. Dell's IT department is really optimized for doing these big deals and ERP migrations and stuff like that, and really not optimized for doing small projects. And so having people that are dedicated in a smaller group to work agile and deliver against business requirements is one of the ways we're trying to find that balance between enabling some organic innovation to happen, out at the edge, and then while maintaining standards so that we don't develop so much stuff that we can't support it. And so the part of that is having the innovation center be the ones that facilitate that innovation, so that we're at least aware of it when it happens, and then when we see really good stuff, then we bring that in and help them scale it. So once they've defined it, then we say, hey, how do we make this leveraged across the whole organization? That's one part to your answer question. The other thing that we're looking at is try to narrow. It comes back to sort of a platform approach. Can we have a small number of standard platforms that we do development on, so that at least from a platform standpoint, and I think the cloud first initiative kind of helps with this a little bit, is the number of diverse skill sets that you have to maintain when you have a bunch of one-off solutions from a ton of different vendors is different than having a standard platform and you do all of your innovation and development on top of that platform. And so that's the other approach that we're taking with that.
Sandra, you're actually part of the shadow IT organization.
A little bit.
But you don't have the resources of a Dow Chemical company, so how do you tackle that probably in a different way, given more constraints?
Arkema's pretty standard in the IT. You can't hook anything up to the business network without going through IT. That's very strict. But when you get to the plant level, if a plant is big enough and has the resources to go and develop some of their own stuff, corporate level won't stop them. If they do need to communicate into the business network, then they'll work with the communication through the firewall if they've got a defined data path or whatever they're trying to communicate with. I am aware of 2 plants in the US that did set up a separate subnet, not on the control system network, but a different one behind a firewall, where they started playing with this digital space. They set up a wireless network for capturing like some AMS type stuff, some meter readings and things like that, and develop their own little system and database, or they go work with a vendor to do a specific application there. And again, if it's something that's good and leverageable to other plants, then it might come through, say, my organization, where we try and leverage things between the different production plants. There's not a lot of top-down standardization between the production facilities, just a few things on the business side of it. They don't push the standardization and the automation layer very much at all. So if you got the money and you have the people, but then you also have to take the risk of supporting it yourself. Unless, like you said, it does come up to the point where, okay, maybe you can turn that into a globally supported application.
And who negotiates that?
It comes up as a project into the IT group. I do have 2 regular
Sure.
meetings with IT. I'm kind of the liaison. It'll come up, and there has to be other support. The plant managers have a lot of pull. There's plant manager networks. If they can come together with a specific push of this is a priority for manufacturing, then that gets taken up to IT as a project, gets, you know, put on the list, funded, and it's reviewed. I have quarterly meetings with IT for the bigger projects, and then monthly meeting for some smaller things I do, because I manage the PI and IP21 data historians. I'm kind of the interface with our IT group for that. You know, it's time for an upgrade, or we need a new interface, things like that.
But without your role, these nice plant projects would just be that, nice plant projects.
Yeah. You know, I'm trying to help with the leveraging. If I see something good here, can I leverage it over there? And if it's something that we need to take to IT, then I try and facilitate taking that up with IT.
Other questions from the audience? Well, I have a summary question. I see your head shaking there. You've experienced it all, I can tell. If you had one thing, each of you answer this question, if you had one thing you could do differently, based on your, what, relative to this particular topic, what would you advise people from a number of you have had learning experiences that you've identified. If the audience had one thing to take away, the most important from your perspective, from the IT perspective, from the OT perspective, and from the interface, those different stakeholders, what would your learning experience be that you would share? Start with you.
If I think back to my specific experience with coming into Arkema, the cutover of the IT systems and the automation systems and stuff, I believe went pretty well. I don't remember any major thing, and I think I probably best can accredit that to is an inventory of all the systems. Making that list of, and the little custom apps, even the spreadsheets or the Access databases, or some of the tools that they had, you know, red tag tool that was at the plant, but making a list of all those IT type tools that all the plants were using, and then with IT then we made an action plan to address each one. Can it be moved into an Arkema standard app, or do we have to move it as is? But I think that was probably key to the success, is having that itemized list and a plan for every piece on that list.
So the person in the middle. What about from the OT perspective? What was your one most identifiable?
Okay, so that's a good one.
Yeah, you recommended it.
But by the same token, I think that from an OT standpoint, you often don't have a seat at the table high enough in the organization when they're doing the acquisition planning, and to understand where those resources are coming from. And everybody just sort of says, well, they'll figure that out. And you know, they forget that the devil's in the details. And that really, the best advice I'd give you is to make sure that your senior management understands that, and that they don't overlook it, and at least give you a seat at the table. They don't have to listen to you, but at least that they understand what they're walking into from that perspective. Because the same way that I shared with you the IT sort of gaining that understanding of, without our plants, we have no, income stream, that needs to be taken into account seriously at an appropriate level to just be incorporated in the planning with all the things that IT and everyone else does understand and knows that they need to do.
Adam, your number one takeaway.
The one thing that I wish I could change, or wish I could have gone back and done differently, was with the Dow Corning integration in particular, was didn't understand adequately the support requirements for the solutions that we're bringing in. And we did not, the assumptions that were made was that our existing organization was adequate to support all of this stuff. We just needed to add more people. But we really did not understand the skill sets that were required and the unique capabilities that were needed. And by the time we figured that out, it was really, really
Some
difficult.
of them were gone.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, some of the people had left, or it was very difficult to reverse decisions that had been made about some of the people who were being let go. And that was one thing that I would do very differently.
Okay, if there's no more questions, let me just bring a conclusion to this. It's strategically imperative that you address both the IT, OT, and the interface requirements of your IT investments, whether they be on the shop floor, at the enterprise level, or in between. And you must have, as a number of the speakers said, you must have full alignment literally from the top down, understanding the value propositions of how you make money, the work processes to support making money or saving money, and all of the interface relationships that need to exist so that that capability can be either sustained, do no harm, or improved, whether it's the acquirer or the acquiree, get the best solution in place. And what we heard from all of them is you must have a plan, a rigorous plan to address both the domains and the interfaces and truly understand the functional capabilities that are needed to run the organization and identify those dependencies and deliverables based on the timeline of synergy or conversion that you're planning to do, getting a good early head start on this with the right resources to tackle the problem. It requires clear definition of what the value propositions of all these interfaces and applications are to the company, and you must have the right organizational design and staffing to pull this off. This is a lot of work to do up front, and usually we hear about this after the deal is done. So this type of activity needs to spool up rather fast. We may not have recurring staff based on all the different acquisitions that have been done, but there are organizations who can support you moving forward. And the key thing is a gap analysis, the inventory of what you've got and the gap analysis of where you have to go from the starting point. So one pitch, ARC does have consulting services to help you identify how to approach things strategically. We don't provide solutions or recommend vendor solutions or anything like that, but we can help you facilitate going through a strategic planning session and point you in the right directions. So if that is of interest to you, certainly you can identify with an ARC representative or myself, and we can help you navigate through the path and maybe take some of the learnings from various ARC clients and help you guide through the process. So I'd like to thank our presenters, and thank you for coming today. And this is the end of the sessions for today. And don't forget the main event tonight at Discovery Bay. We'll be gathering out just out here, and the buses will pick us up outside. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you. Appreciate it.